The coffee in Maya Torres's cup had gone cold hours ago, but she didn't notice. Her eyes moved across the holographic display, showing the twisted wreckage of what should have been the galaxy's greatest achievement. Titan Station floated in the darkness, like a broken promise, its hull scarred by 3 decades of failed attempts to bring it online. Maya pushed a strand of dark hair behind her ear and zoomed in on the quantum field generator arrays. The other students in the academy library whispered and pointed at her screen. They thought she was crazy for choosing Titan Station as her practicum project. Maybe they were right. Still staring at that junk heap? Her roommate Alex dropped into the chair beside her. Maya, that thing has defeated every genius in the galaxy. The Altarians sent their best crystal mines. The Centauri Collective worked on it for 5 years. Even the ancient Vegans gave up. Maya didn't look away from the screen. That's exactly why I want to try. Alex laughed. You've been here 6 months. 6 months. Those other species have been building things since before. Earth even had cities. What makes you think you can solve what they couldn't? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maya finally turned to face her friend. Because maybe they're all thinking about it wrong. The truth was, Maya had been thinking about Titan Station since her first week at the academy, while other students focused on their basic courses in stellar mechanics and quantum theory. She found herself drawn to the engineering disasters, the projects that should have worked but didn't, the brilliant ideas that failed in spectacular ways. Titan Station was the crown jewel of failures. Designed to be a deep space research facility capable of studying the mysterious dark matter streams that flowed between galaxies, it had everything needed except one crucial element. It couldn't actually function. The problem lay in the quantum field generators that were supposed to create a stable pocket of space-time around the station. Every attempt to activate them resulted in what the engineers politely called cascade failures. Maya had read the reports. The explosions could be seen from 3 star systems away. She pulled up the technical specifications again. The mathematics were beautiful, elegant in their complexity. 17 different dimensional frequencies had to align perfectly to create the quantum bubble. The margin for error was less than 1 part in a trillion. Look at this, Maya said, pointing to the frequency charts. They're trying to make everything perfect. Every harmonic has to be exactly right. Alex squinted at the display. Well, yeah. That's how quantum fields work. You can't just guess. But what if perfect is the problem? Maya stood up and started pacing. What if trying to make everything line up exactly is what keeps making it explode? Her friend gave her a look that suggested Maya might need medical attention. That makes no sense. You can't build advanced technology by making it imperfect on purpose. Maya thought about home, about the asteroid mining colonies where she grew up. Her father had been a deep rock miner, one of the humans who went into the most dangerous shafts to extract rare metals. She remembered watching him work with equipment that was held together with spare parts and hope. My dad used to say that sometimes the strongest structures are the ones that can bend, Maya said. Perfect things break when you put too much stress on them. But things that are a little bit flexible, a little bit imperfect, they can handle more than you'd expect. Alex shook her head. Maya, we're talking about quantum physics, not mining equipment. Are we, though? Maya sat back down and pulled up a new set of calculations. What if, instead of trying to make all 17 frequencies perfectly aligned, we deliberately made them slightly off? Not random, but controlled imperfections that create their own stability? The idea felt crazy even as she said it. Every textbook, every professor, every piece of conventional wisdom said that quantum fields required precision beyond imagination. The slightest deviation could cause reality itself to hiccup. But Maya had grown up watching humans solve impossible problems with whatever they had available. When the main life support system on Mining Station 7 had failed, her neighbor hadn't waited for replacement parts. He'd rigged a solution using 3 different incompatible systems that somehow worked together. She started sketching out rough calculations on her tablet. What if the cascade failures weren't random disasters, but predictable responses to the system trying too hard to be perfect? What if she could map those failures and use them as features instead of bugs? The more she worked, the more excited she became. The conventional approach treated the quantum field generators like a delicate instrument that had to be played with surgical precision. But what if they were more like a jazz ensemble, where the magic happened in the spaces between the notes? I need to talk to Professor Webb, Maya said suddenly. Alex looked alarmed. Maya, don't do anything stupid. Webb is in charge of practicum assignments. If you go to her with some half-baked theory about deliberate imperfection, she'll think you've lost your mind. Maybe I have. Maya was already packing up her things, but maybe that's exactly what this problem needs. The walk to Professor Webb's office felt longer than usual. Maya's footsteps echoed in the empty hallways of the academy. Most students were either in class or sleeping, but Maya's mind was too active for either. She thought about all the brilliant minds that had tackled Titan Station. The Altarians with their crystalline logic systems that could process 1,000,000 calculations simultaneously. The Centauri collective that could share thoughts across their entire species. The Vegans with their 1,000,000-year-old civilization and accumulated wisdom. All of them had failed because they were too smart, too perfect, too logical. They couldn't conceive of a solution that wasn't elegant and precise, but Maya had grown up around humans who made elegant solutions out of chaos every day. When she reached Professor Webb's door, Maya paused. Inside was either her future as an engineer or the end of her academy career. She thought about her father, working in the dangerous depths of asteroids because someone had to do the impossible jobs. Maya knocked on the door. It was time to see if being human was enough to solve what perfection couldn't handle. The review board chamber felt colder than space itself. Maya sat at a small table facing 7 of the most brilliant minds in the galaxy, her proposal displayed on the central hologram like evidence in a trial. She tried not to think about how many careers had ended in this room. Professor Webb sat at the center of the panel, her expression unreadable. To her left, the Altarian delegate's crystal body pulsed with different colors as it processed Maya's calculations. The colors weren't encouraging. Miss Torres, Professor Webb began, you're asking us to approve a field test that goes against every principle of quantum engineering we've established over the past millennium. Maya nodded. Yes, ma'am. You want to deliberately introduce instabilities into a system that has already failed catastrophically dozens of times. That's correct. The Vegan representative, a being so old that its species had forgotten its original name, spoke in a voice like wind through dry leaves. Child, we have been building with quantum fields since your species was discovering fire. What you propose is not innovation. It is vandalism. Maya felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her voice steady. With respect, sir, maybe that's the problem. Maybe you've been building the same way for so long that you can't see other possibilities. A ripple of shocked whispers ran through the gallery, where other students and faculty had gathered to watch. No one spoke to a Vegan elder like that, especially not a first-year student. The Centauri Collective's representative spoke with the voices of 1,000 minds. We have modeled your proposal through every possible scenario. The probability of success is less than 0.01%. The probability of complete system destruction is 97.4%. Your models assume that destruction is failure, Maya replied. What if it's just part of the process? She stood up and walked to the hologram, her hands shaking slightly as she manipulated the display. Every attempt to activate Titan Station's quantum fields has ended in what you call cascade failure. But look at the pattern of these failures. The hologram showed a timeline of all previous attempts, each ending in spectacular explosions. But Maya had spent weeks analyzing the data, and she'd found something everyone else had missed. The failures aren't random. They follow a specific sequence, like a musical pattern that keeps trying to complete itself but gets cut off each time. She highlighted the energy readings from each disaster. Each explosion happens at exactly the moment when the system would naturally achieve stability if we let it. Professor Webb leaned forward. Let it? Miss Torres, these explosions have enough energy to sterilize entire planets, only because we keep trying to stop them instead of channeling them. Maya's confidence grew as she explained her theory. What if the cascade isn't a failure at all? What if it's the system trying to find its own equilibrium? She manipulated. The hologram again showing her proposed modifications. Instead of the elegant, symmetrical arrays that previous engineers had designed, her quantum field generators looked almost crude. Where others had used perfect crystalline matrices, Maya proposed using recycled fusion cores with deliberately unbalanced output patterns. The Altarian's crystal body flashed bright red, a sign of extreme agitation. This is chaos. You cannot build stable technology from unstable components. Maya smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Actually, you can. Humans do it all the time. She thought about her conversation with her father the night before, when she'd called home to explain what she was trying to do. He'd laughed and told her about the time Mining Station 7 had lost its main power grid during a solar storm. We had 3 different backup systems, she said, and none of them were designed to work together. The Altarian system used crystal matrices, the Centauri system used collective processing nodes, and the human system used good old-fashioned magnetic bottles. The engineers said it was impossible to make them compatible. The review board waited, though Maya could see several members checking their chronometers. But when the main power failed, we didn't have time to engineer a perfect solution. We just connected everything together and hoped for the best. It shouldn't have worked. All the manuals said it would cause destructive interference patterns. Maya paused, remembering the moment when the lights had come back on throughout the station. Instead, the 3 systems started compensating for each other's weaknesses. The Altarian crystals provided precision. The Centauri nodes provided processing. Power and the human magnetic bottles provided flexibility. Together, they created something more stable than any single system. The Vegan elder's ancient eyes seemed to focus on Maya for the first time. You propose to build Titan Station the same way? Using incompatible systems? Not incompatible. Complementary. Maya brought up her detailed schematics. Instead of trying to force 17 different frequencies into perfect alignment, I want to let them find their own balance. Create controlled chaos that stabilizes itself through interaction. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the environmental systems. Maya could hear her own heartbeat as the review board considered her proposal. Professor Webb finally spoke. Miss Torres, do you understand what you're asking? If your theory is wrong, you won't just destroy Titan Station. The energy release could destabilize the entire sector. And if I'm right, we complete the most important research facility in galactic history. Maya met each board member's gaze in turn. Every great advancement has required someone to risk everything on an idea that seemed impossible. The Centauri collective spoke again. The human approach to engineering has always puzzled us. You build with insufficient materials, imprecise calculations, and excessive optimism. By all logic, your technology should fail constantly. Maya waited for the criticism that was sure to follow. Instead, you create solutions that continue functioning long after they should have broken down. Your ships held together with spare parts outperform our precision-built vessels. Your colonies thrive in conditions our models say are uninhabitable. The ancient vegan leaned back in its chair. Perhaps it is time we learned from chaos instead of fighting it. Professor Webb called for a vote. One by one, the board members gave their decision. Maya held her breath as the votes were tallied. When the final count came in, she almost couldn't believe it. Motion approved, Professor Webb announced. Miss Torres, you have permission to conduct a field test of your chaos-based quantum field system. May whatever gods you believe in help us all. The transport ship shuddered as it approached Titan Station, and Maya pressed her face to the viewport to get her first real look at the project that had consumed her thoughts for months. The massive structure hung in the darkness like a metallic skeleton, its incomplete sections reaching out into space like broken fingers. Impressive, isn't it? Captain Brooks, the transport pilot, joined her at the viewport. 30 years of the best minds in the galaxy, and all they managed to build was the most expensive piece of scrap metal in known space. Maya studied the station's hull, scarred and blackened from decades of failed tests. Each burn mark told the story of another brilliant theory that had ended in explosion. It's not scrap metal, it's potential. Brooks laughed. Well, you're about to find out which one it really is. Your team's already aboard, setting up equipment. Nice bunch of misfits you've collected. Maya's team was indeed an odd collection. When the Galactic Engineering Corps had asked for volunteers to work on her project, most of the established engineers had politely declined. The ones who did volunteer were either desperate for work, curious about chaos theory, or too young to know better. There was Tom Chen, a human engineer who'd been blacklisted from major projects after suggesting that starship hulls would be stronger, if they were slightly flexible. Rita Voss had been kicked out of the Altarian Academy for proposing that crystal matrices worked better when they had minor flaws. The Centauri Collective had exiled Dex because his thought patterns didn't synchronize properly with the group mind. A crew of rejects working on an impossible project, Maya muttered. This should be interesting. The docking process took longer than usual because several of the station's docking bays had been destroyed in previous tests. Brooks had to maneuver carefully around twisted metal and floating debris to reach one of the intact airlocks. Maya floated through the station's corridors, in zero gravity, following maintenance lights toward the central engineering section. The walls showed blast damage from the most recent failure attempt, and several sections were sealed off entirely. This wasn't just a research station, it was a monument to the limits of conventional thinking. She found her team in the main engineering bay, surrounded by crates of equipment that looked like it had been salvaged from a dozen different scrapyards. Tom was connecting a human fusion core to what appeared to be a modified Altarian crystal matrix, while Rita worked on adapting Centauri processing nodes to interface with both systems. Maya! Dex's voice came from somewhere inside a maintenance panel. We've been studying the existing quantum field generators. They're beautiful pieces of engineering, but they're built like musical instruments that can only play one perfect note. That's the problem, Maya replied, pulling herself over to examine their work. We need instruments that can improvise. Tom looked up from his fusion core. The modifications are going better than expected. Your harmonic discord generators are actually pretty elegant, in a chaotic sort of way. Maya smiled at the contradiction. Her design deliberately introduced controlled instabilities into the quantum field matrix, instead of trying to align 17 different frequencies perfectly. Her system would let them drift slightly, using the natural interference patterns to create stability through constant small adjustments. It's like tuning a guitar, Rita explained to a visiting inspector from the engineering corps. You don't want every string to be exactly the same tension. You want them to be different enough that they complement each other. The inspector, a stern Altarian named Keltar, flickered with disapproving colors. This equipment appears to be constructed from salvaged components. Surely the Corps can provide you with proper materials. This is proper material, Maya said. It's just not perfect material. She showed Keltar one of her modified quantum field generators. Where a standard generator used flawless crystalline arrays arranged in perfect geometric patterns, Maya's version incorporated recycled fusion cores with slightly irregular output curves, crystal matrices with deliberate minor flaws, and processing nodes that had been rejected by quality control for being insufficiently synchronized. Each imperfection is carefully calculated, Maya explained. The fusion core's irregular output creates natural fluctuations in the quantum field. The flawed crystals introduce harmonic variations. The unsynchronized processors provide random timing adjustments. Together, they create a system that's constantly adapting instead of trying to maintain rigid perfection. Keltar's crystal body pulsed with what Maya had learned to recognize as confusion. But how can imperfect components create superior performance? Because perfection is brittle, Dex said, emerging from the maintenance panel covered in lubricant. Perfect systems have no flexibility. When something unexpected happens, they break. Imperfect systems bend instead of breaking. Maya spent the next several days working around the clock with her team, installing the chaos generators throughout Titan Station. The work was exhausting and dangerous. Several sections of the station were still unstable from previous test failures, and they had to work in environmental suits because life support was unreliable. But as the installation progressed, Maya began to feel something she hadn't expected. The station was starting to feel alive. The constant small vibrations from their imperfect equipment created a subtle rhythm throughout the structure, like a heartbeat. The preliminary readings are promising, Rita reported during one of their planning sessions. The chaos generators are creating exactly the kind of controlled instability you predicted. The quantum fields are fluctuating, but within manageable parameters. Tom looked less optimistic. The engineering corps is getting nervous. They've stationed 3 evacuation ships in the area, and they're talking about limiting the first test to 1/10 power. No, Maya said firmly. If we test at partial power, we won't get the full chaos cascade. The system needs to reach critical instability before it can find its equilibrium. Dex's multiple thought processes allowed him to consider several scenarios simultaneously. The risk analysis shows a 73% chance of complete system failure if we proceed at full power, but it also shows 0% chance of success if we don't. Maya floated over to the main control panel and looked out at the space where Titan Station's quantum bubble would form if her theory was correct. For 30 years, this region of space had been the site of spectacular failures. Tomorrow, it would either become the location of humanity's greatest engineering triumph or its most expensive disaster. We're not just testing a theory, she told her team. We're testing whether chaos can be stronger than perfection, whether adaptation can beat precision, whether being human is enough. The night before the test, Maya couldn't sleep. She floated in her quarters, looking out at the stars and thinking about all the brilliant minds that had tried to solve this problem before her. They had failed not because they weren't smart enough, but because they were too smart, too logical, too perfect. Tomorrow, she would find out if being imperfect was actually an advantage. The first test lasted exactly 47 seconds before Titan Station nearly tore itself apart. Maya floated in the emergency shelter, listening to damage reports crackling over the communication system, and tried not to think about how much money she'd just vaporized in less than a minute. Docking Bay 7 is completely gone, Tom reported, his voice tight with stress. The quantum cascade blew through the hull like it was paper. We're lucky the main structure held together. Maya activated her helmet display and reviewed the sensor data from the test. The energy readings looked like a seismograph during a major earthquake, with massive spikes followed by complete system collapse. But buried in all that chaos, she could see something the others had missed. It almost worked, she said quietly. Rita's voice came through the comm with barely controlled panic. Almost worked? Maya, we just created the biggest explosion in this sector since the last star went nova. How is that almost working? Maya pulled herself over to the main display terminal and began analyzing the failure pattern. Look at the energy distribution in the first 30 seconds. The quantum fields were stabilizing. They were actually finding balance before the cascade failure. Dex joined her at the terminal, his unique thought processes allowing him to see patterns that linear thinkers missed. She's right. The harmonic discord generators were creating exactly the kind of controlled chaos we predicted, but something else interfered. What kind of something else? Tom asked, floating over to check the structural damage readings. Maya spent the next 6 hours diving deep into the sensor data, looking for the factor she'd missed in her calculations. The station's quantum field generators had been working perfectly, creating the controlled instabilities that should have led to stable equilibrium. But just as the system was approaching balance, something had pushed it over the edge into catastrophic failure. "There," she said finally, highlighting a specific data stream. "Gravitational interference." Her team gathered around the display as Maya explained what she'd found. Titan Station occupied a unique position in space, where the gravitational fields of 7 different stellar objects created complex interference patterns. Previous engineers had considered this a minor factor, easily compensated for by the station's positioning thrusters. But it's not minor, Maya realized. The gravitational turbulence is constantly changing, creating fluctuations that our chaos generators can't predict or adapt to. Every time we get close to equilibrium, the gravity shifts throw us back into instability. Rita looked defeated. So we can't make it work? The location itself prevents the system from stabilizing? Maya stared at the gravitational readings, her mind racing through possibilities. The conventional engineering approach would be to move the station to a more stable location, but that would take years and cost more than building a new facility from scratch. "What if we don't fight the gravitational chaos?" Maya said slowly. "What if we use it?" Tom gave her a look that suggested she might have suffered brain damage in the explosion. "Use gravitational turbulence? Maya, that's like trying to build a house during an earthquake." "No. It's like learning to dance with the earthquake instead of fighting it." Maya's excitement grew as the solution became clear in her mind. "We've been treating the gravitational interference as a problem to overcome. But what if it's actually the missing piece of the puzzle?" She began sketching modifications to their system, her hands moving rapidly across the holographic interface. Instead of trying to compensate for the gravitational fluctuations, she would incorporate them into the chaos cascade itself, the gravitational. "Turbulence follows predictable patterns," she explained. 7 stellar objects, each with measurable orbital mechanics. We can map their combined influence and use it as a natural timing mechanism for our quantum field adjustments. Dex's thought processes accelerated as he grasped the implications. "You want to synchronize our chaos generators with the gravitational chaos. Create a feedback loop between the artificial quantum fields and the natural gravitational disturbances." "Exactly. Instead of trying to create perfect stability in an unstable environment, we create adaptive stability that flows with the environment." The next 72 hours blurred together as Maya's team worked to implement the new modifications. They had to rebuild significant portions of the quantum field array, adding gravitational sensors and adaptive feedback systems that could respond to the constantly changing stellar influences. Maya barely slept, surviving on caffeine and determination, while she fine-tuned the calculations that would either save the project or destroy it completely. The mathematics were incredibly complex, requiring her to predict the interactions between artificial quantum fields, natural gravitational forces, and controlled chaos generators. "The engineering core is getting impatient," Rita warned during one of their brief breaks. "They're talking about shutting down the project if the next test fails." "Then we make sure it doesn't fail," Maya replied, making another adjustment to the gravitational compensation algorithms. The modifications looked even more chaotic than the original design. Maya's quantum field generators now resembled a mad scientist's experiment, with components that seemed to have been randomly connected according to no logical pattern. But every connection had been carefully calculated to work with the natural chaos of their environment rather than against it. "I've run the calculations 17 different ways," Tom reported on the morning of the second test. "Mathematically, this shouldn't work. The system is too complex, too dependent on variables we can't fully control." Maya floated at the main control station, her hands poised over the activation sequence. Mathematics can only take you so far. Sometimes you have to trust intuition. The countdown began, and Maya felt the familiar mixture of excitement and terror that came with pushing the boundaries of known science. Around her, the station hummed with barely contained energy as the quantum field generators prepared to reshape local space-time. 10 seconds to activation, Rita announced. Maya thought about her father, working in the dangerous depths of asteroid mines because someone had to do the impossible jobs. She thought about all the human engineers who had built incredible things from spare parts and stubborn optimism. 5 seconds. The gravitational sensors showed the complex dance of stellar influences around Titan Station, 7 different forces pulling and pushing in a pattern that had remained unchanged for millions of years. Activation. Maya pressed the control, and, for the second time in as many weeks, she attempted to harness chaos itself in service of human ambition. But this time, instead of fighting the natural forces around them, she was asking those forces to help. The quantum fields came online with a sound like distant thunder, and Maya held her breath as the sensors registered the beginning of what could be either breakthrough or catastrophe. Maya's hands trembled on the control console as Titan Station's quantum fields began their delicate dance with chaos. The displays around her showed energy readings that defied every textbook she'd ever studied, fluctuating wildly as 17. Different frequencies tried to find harmony in the gravitational turbulence of 7 stellar objects. Energy cascade building, Tom reported, his voice tight with concentration. But it's not following the same pattern as last time. Maya watched the holographic display that showed the quantum field interactions in real time. Instead of the rigid, geometric patterns that conventional engineering produced, her system created something that looked almost organic. The energy flows twisted and curved, adapting moment by moment to the changing gravitational influences. "It's learning," Dex said, with wonder in his multiple voices. "The feedback loops are actually teaching the system how to respond to gravitational changes." 20 seconds passed, then 30. Maya had never seen a test run this long without either achieving stability or exploding catastrophically. The quantum fields continued their complex dance, each fluctuation teaching the system something new about how to maintain balance in chaos. 40 seconds, Rita announced. "We're past the failure point of every previous test." The energy readings began to show something unprecedented. Instead of building toward either perfect stability or complete collapse, the quantum fields were finding a middle path. They oscillated gently, like a ship riding ocean swells instead of fighting them. "Gravitational compensation systems are fully synchronized," Tom reported with growing excitement. "The chaos generators are adapting to stellar influence patterns in real time." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes as she watched 30 years of failure transform into the galaxy's greatest engineering success. The quantum fields weren't just stable, they were elegant, dancing with the natural forces around them instead of trying to dominate them. 1 minute and holding, Rita called out. "Energy output is exceeding design specifications by 40%. The communication system crackled to life with voices from the evacuation ships stationed nearby. Maya could hear the amazement in their voices as sensor readings confirmed what seemed impossible. Titan Station was not only functional, it was performing better than anyone had dared to hope. "Station Commander Torres," came a voice that Maya recognized as Admiral Kirk from the Engineering Corps flagship. "Are you reading these power output numbers correctly?" Maya keyed her microphone with a shaking hand. "Yes, sir. The quantum field matrix has achieved stable operation at 140% of design capacity." "That's impossible," the Admiral replied. "Perfect systems don't exceed their design parameters." "This isn't a perfect system, sir," Maya said, looking at the beautiful chaos displayed on her screens. "It's an adaptive system. It gets stronger as it learns." Over the next several hours, more ships arrived to witness what many were calling the engineering miracle of the millennium. Scientists from every major species in the galaxy came to study Maya's chaos-based approach to quantum field generation. Dr. Veltar, the Altarian who had dismissed Maya's proposal months earlier, stood in Titan Station's main engineering bay with his crystal body pulsing colors of complete bewilderment. "The mathematics should not work," he said repeatedly. "The system violates fundamental principles of quantum field theory." "No," Maya corrected gently. "It violates our assumptions about quantum field theory. The mathematics work perfectly once you accept that chaos and order aren't opposites. They're dance partners." The Centauri Collective had sent their finest analytical minds to study the station's quantum field arrays. They spent days trying to understand how components with deliberate flaws could outperform perfectly manufactured equipment. "We have modeled your design through every possible scenario," their spokesperson reported. "According to all known physics, these generators should have destroyed themselves within microseconds of activation." Tom, who had spent weeks installing the chaotic components, laughed. "That's what we kept telling Maya. But she had this crazy idea that maybe the known physics weren't as complete as we thought." The ancient vegan scholar who had initially opposed the project arrived on the third day after activation. It spent hours studying the energy flow patterns, occasionally making soft sounds of what Maya hoped was approval. "In our million-year history," the vegan finally said, "we have built many perfect things, monuments that will last until the stars die, technologies of supreme elegance and precision, but we have never built anything that improves itself." Maya floated beside the elder, watching the quantum fields through the observation port. The energy patterns had grown even more complex over the past few days, as the system continued learning from each gravitational fluctuation. "Perfect things can't grow," Maya replied. "They can only maintain themselves or decay. But imperfect things, chaotic things, they can adapt and improve and become something greater than they were designed to be." The formal recognition came a week later, when the Galactic Engineering Corps held an emergency session to review Maya's achievement. Representatives from every major civilization attended, either in person or through quantum link. Professor Webb presided over the session, her expression mixing pride and amazement. In 30 years of attempts by the galaxy's finest minds, no one had been able to activate Titan Station's quantum field system. Miss Torres not only succeeded, but created a system that exceeds all design parameters and continues to improve its own performance. Maya sat at the witness table, still wearing her work coveralls because she'd been too busy monitoring the station's systems to change clothes. Around her, beings who represented millions of years of accumulated knowledge were struggling to understand how a first-year academy student had solved their greatest engineering challenge. The solution required thinking that was completely outside conventional paradigms, Maya explained when asked to describe her approach. Every previous attempt tried to impose perfect order on a chaotic environment. I decided to embrace the chaos and work with it instead of against it. The Altarian representative's crystal body flickered with rapid color changes. "But how did you know this approach would work? What gave you confidence to risk everything on such an unproven theory?" Maya thought about her father, still working in the asteroid mines, despite having a daughter who was about to become the youngest master engineer in galactic history. She thought about all the humans who had built impossible things because no one had told them it couldn't be done. "I grew up around people who solved problems with whatever materials they had available," she said. "We didn't have the luxury of perfect components or ideal conditions. We learned to make things work by embracing imperfection and finding strength in flexibility." The vote was unanimous. Maya Torres was promoted from trainee to master engineer, the youngest being ever to achieve that rank. But more importantly, her success had opened new possibilities for engineering throughout the galaxy. The human approach, as it became known, revolutionized how civilizations thought about building complex systems. Instead of seeking perfect solutions, engineers began designing adaptive ones. Instead of fighting chaos, They learned to dance with it. Maya returned to Titan Station after the ceremony, floating through corridors that hummed with perfectly imperfect energy. The quantum fields continued their eternal dance, growing stronger and more elegant with each passing day. She thought about the galaxy's greatest minds who had tried and failed to complete this project. They hadn't failed because they weren't smart enough. They had failed because they were too smart to believe that imperfection could be better than perfection. Sometimes, Maya realized, the best solution to an impossible problem was to be too human to accept that it was impossible. In a universe built on the marriage of order and chaos, it had taken a species born from chaos to show everyone else how to make the marriage work. The stars danced outside her viewport, and Maya smiled as Titan Station danced with them, finding perfect harmony in beautiful imperfection.